Trigonometric equations, the general solution. The trig equation, sine of a equals minus a half, has two solutions in the primary interval, namely 210 degrees and 330 degrees. So the primary interval is between 0 and 360 degrees. So we know this because we have a minus in front, which tells us that we're interested where sine is negative. And sine is negative in the third and fourth quadrants. So in the third quadrant, which is down here, so we know we follow CAST, so there would be a T in this quadrant, which means that tan is positive, which means that everything else is negative. So sine is negative in the third quadrant, and sine is also negative in the fourth quadrant. So CAST, this stands for, C here stands for cosine, which means that cosine is positive. So if cosine is positive, then sine is negative in the fourth quadrant. So sine of a equals minus a half, so sine of 4 equals positive a half. We make this into a positive because we always take the modulus. So the reference angle is going to be 30 degrees because sine of 4 equal to a half, the inverse function of sine of a half is 30, so the reference angle is 30 degrees. So in the third quadrant, to figure out the angle, we're going to say 180 degrees plus the reference angle. So 180 degrees plus 30 degrees is 210 degrees. So that's where 210 comes from. And in the fourth quadrant, it's going to be 360 degrees minus the reference angle. So 360 degrees minus 30 degrees is 330 degrees. That's what that 330 degrees comes from. So we need to learn off by heart CAST, C-A-S-T. So this tells us that in the first quadrant, all are positive. In the second quadrant, only sine is positive. In the third quadrant, only tan is positive. And in the fourth quadrant, only cosine is positive. So again, the trig equation, sine of a is equal to minus a half, has two solutions in the primary interval, 210 degrees and 330 degrees. All the other solutions of this equation can be found by adding or subtracting full circles. A full circle is 360 degrees, to or from each of these solutions. This comes from the full circles result given in section 14.3. The full list of solutions of this equation is a equals 210 degrees, 210 degrees plus or minus 360 degrees, 210 degrees plus or minus 2 times 360 degrees, and so on. And a equals 330 degrees, 330 degrees plus or minus 360 degrees, 330 degrees plus or minus 2 times 360 degrees. This is called a general solution of the equation and can be written down more concisely as follows. A equals 210 degrees plus n times 360 degrees, or A equals 330 degrees plus n times 360 degrees for n elements of z, so for all integers. In radian form, this general solution can be written as A equals 7 pi over 6 plus n times 2 pi, or A equals 11 pi over 6 plus n times 2 pi. For n elements of z, so for n that are integers. Or we can simplify again to say a equals 7 pi over 6 plus 2n pi. So n times 2 pi is 2n pi, or 11 pi over 6 plus 2n pi, again for n elements of z. To find the general solution of trig equation, first, find all the solutions in the primary interval, either as special cases or using the general method. And secondly, add plus n times 360 or plus 2n pi to each solution in the primary interval, or write out the solutions in a list. Find all the solutions of the equation cos of x equals minus root 3 over 2 for x values elements of the real number set. So first, it's important to note that this is a minus and cos is negative in the second and third quadrants. So we follow CAST. So cos is negative in the second and third quadrant. So we start by letting cos of or be equal to positive root 3 over 2. And into the calculator, we get or equal to 30 degrees. So the reference angle is 30 degrees. Then we go to the second quadrant. And we have to say 180, take away the reference angle. So 180 take away 30 degrees is 150 degrees. Then we go to the third quadrant. We have to say 180 plus the reference angle. So 180 plus 30 degrees is 210 degrees. Part 2, we're going to find the general solution. So we got 150 degrees and we've got 210 degrees. So x is equal to 150 degrees plus n times 360 degrees, or x is equal to 210 degrees plus n times 360 degrees for all n values elements of the integer set. Or it can be written like so: x equals 150 degrees plus minus 360 degrees, 150 degrees plus minus 2 times 360 degrees, and so on. Or x is equal to 210 degrees plus or minus 360 degrees, 210 degrees plus or minus 2 times 360 degrees.